Hey guys, in this video we're going to be checking out the Diatone GT-M3, and this is a model that I've been testing out for a couple of months now. I finally have the production version here. This is a final version in the normal X frame. And before I get into the rest of the video, I'm going to go ahead and answer the question that everyone is dying to ask. Is this the best 3-inch drone? And I guess the best way for me to answer that is, would I buy this one or would I buy the XJB145, which I had considered to be probably one of the better ones out there in the 3-inch class? And my answer to that, for all you guys are asking which is the best, is I would get the Diatone GT-M3 over the XJB145. Now I'm going to go over all the reasons for my answer in this video, so if you want to get details on that, you can watch the rest of the video. But for those of you guys just want that answer and want to leave, that's my answer to you guys. I would get this one over the XJB145. Okay, so that now that I've got that question out of the way, I can go ahead and get into the details of this drone. This comes in 3 versions. It's a normal X version with the one you're seeing here. There is a stretched X version. This is actually a prototype, one of the last prototypes here. And then there's a plus version, which I don't have, and you can see photos of that on the Diatone website if you want to check out that particular model. It's gone through a bunch of iterations. I'll go over the history of my testing here a little bit later in the video if you guys are interested into the details of that, all you drone nerds out there that you might be interested in how this model came to be. But I'll just go over all these specs here. We have a 4-in-1 20 amp ESC. We got the Fury F4 OSD flight controller. It's the same flight controller that was on the GT-R90 with the 32K gyro. And then we also have the same TBS Unify video transmitter that also was on the R90. Obviously we have a 3-inch frame here, 3mm arms, and these are actually separated arms. And you can see here these arms are replaceable if you happen to break them. There's 4 individual arms that screw into the frame. The frame construction is pretty much the same as the GT-M200, the 5-inch version. So basically it's a shrunken down version of that frame. You have the same micro CCD camera that's on the GT-R90. It's a 600 TV line Sony sensor CCD camera, very good camera. They have got these new motors on here, very powerful motors. They're Diatone branded, but they're developed by Sunny Sky. They're the Edge Racing 1408 4000 kV motors. These motors have crazy amounts of power and they will destroy your batteries. So you're going to need some really nice batteries to fly this the way you would want to fly for all you speed demons out there. The props that come with this are the Gemfan 3052 tri-blades. These are Gemfan flash props. These are very good props, and the ones that I recommended Diatone put on these motors, and these have worked out really well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get some measurements here of the different frames. This is the normal X version. It's 130mm motor to motor. The front to back distance is about 81mm. The side to side distance is about 101mm. So it's an H-style frame, not a true X frame. And here's some measurements for the stretched X version of the frame. It's about 143mm motor to motor, and runs about 94mm side to side, and it's about 107mm front to back. Okay, the weight of the normal X version is about 142 grams, and the stretched X version here comes in at about 138 grams. I think the stretched X version here is a little bit lighter because these are prototype motors. They're not the final version, so I think they made some more changes to the motor due to video noise. I complained to Diatone on this particular prototype. There was too much video noise, either from the ESCs or the motors, and they told me that they, I guess they tweaked the design of the motor to the final version to reduce the video noise. However, they do include a capacitor with the production version. I'm not exactly sure why they elected not to go ahead and just install it. It's possible that my suggestion on the capacitor came in too late and they had already started production, so this is why they're just throwing it in the bag and into the box. But it shouldn't be too hard to get this on there. You're gonna solder them onto the battery lead right there on the 4-in-1 ESC. So you would have to do a little bit of disassembly to get this soldered on. However, I found that on the final version, the video noise was actually dramatically reduced compared to one of the earlier prototypes. So I didn't really feel a need to go ahead and put the capacitor on there. But if you feel that the video noise is a problem for you, then I would suggest go ahead and put that capacitor on there. That should clear up your video noise right away. Okay, so why would I pick the Diatone over the HGLRC model? Mostly it has to do with the power of the motors. It's a bigger motor. The one that comes on the HGLRC is a 1407 3600 kV, still lower kV. The one on the Diatone is a Sunny Sky 1408 4000 kV, so it's got considerable more top end. It is a little bit heavier than the XGB, but it's got way more power. But you will need very good batteries to be able to take advantage of that power. Even on I have some pretty good Pulse 654 lipos. I was only getting about 2 minutes of flight time, so I'll probably have to go to an 850. It definitely can carry the weight around, no problem. It's got plenty of power for that. The other reason that I would pick the Diatone over the XGB is that I like this design better. I like the aluminum cage. I like the fact that the arms are replaceable if you crash, and trust me, this thing in a crash at super high speed, you will break an arm, even though it is 3 millimeters. They will have replaceable arms available, so that's an advantage. Whereas over on the XGB, you break an arm, you got to replace the entire bottom plates, so that can be kind of a pain. Now the ESC on the XGB is a little bit bigger. It's a 28 amp versus a 20 amp on the Diatone, but I think that's fine. They originally designed this with a, well, actually I'll go into the history of that a little bit later, but it was the same ESC that was in the R90, which didn't work out too well, which is why they had to go through several design changes to get to this point. But yeah, even though the ESC is a little bit smaller, it's plenty of ESC for these particular motors. I didn't have any issues with flips to death or any kind of other problems like ESC fires or anything like that, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Now, the one thing I still don't like about the Diatone is that they're still using the 32K gyro that was on the same flight controller from the R90. I actually don't see any advantage to going to 32K on something that's 3 inches or smaller. The gyro on the XGB is the MPU 6000. It's an 8K gyro. They're both F4 boards. Both have Betaflight OSDs. It's just that the tuning on 32K gyro is a little bit more problematic, and you do have to be worried about noise and vibrations getting into the gyro from the motors, the arms, etc., and also electrical noise. So it does require a little more tuning, a little more care in the design, and also the build and stuff like that. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the history of how this model came to be. But I would say that if they switched the flight controller to an 8K gyro, then that whatever advantage the XGB had there would go away. Now, I've heard that they are developing a new flight controller for these 3-inch and smaller models. I think that they're developing a new F4 Fury OSD board with the 8K gyro instead of the 32K gyro. So if they switch those out at some point in the future, then a lot of these tuning issues will just go away, and then that will just pretty much make this a very flyable with very little tuning at all. Now, they're both plug and play, so you still have to add a receiver for both of these. The cost on the Diatone is a little bit more, but I feel that the extra cost on the Diatone is worth it because they do a lot of research and development and testing of their models before they send them out, and they make changes based on feedback from people like myself and other people that fly these, and I think that extra cost is reflected in the final design. Make sure that a product that goes out to you is actually flyable, doesn't have too many problems. Whereas a lot of other companies, I mean, I'll just use Furby as an example. They send a lot of products out to reviewers that haven't been tested or flown at all, and some of them, as you've probably seen on other videos on my channel, they come to me and they aren't flyable out of the box. Now, the company HGLRC isn't like that, and I'm sure they've got other people testing it. I haven't tested their products before they went to production, so I can't say how much they've tested or not tested. For the most part, I think HGLRC is a good company. They have a lot of really good flight controllers, and they're 20 by 20 stacks, like the F428, the F440. I've had very good results with all of their products, so I'm pretty sure they do a lot of testing before they send them out. I personally haven't tested their products before they've gone to production. Okay, so a little history behind the development of the M3. When they first sent me the first prototype of the M3, it was all based on parts from the R90, the 2-inch model. And obviously the motors are different, the frame was different, but they had the same flight stack, the same flight controller, the same 4-in-1 ASC and camera. And I think this is parts from the first prototype, but I swapped it from a different frame. The very first frame they sent me was like this one is a unibody design frame. It's just no separated arms, and these arms were too skinny. So they were 3mm arms, but they were even skinnier than this here. I'm not exactly sure what the thickness or the width of this arm is, but it was much skinnier than this. And because they were using these powerful 1408 motors on, I think this is a 13 amp BSD from the R90, don't remember exactly. I was getting flips to death right away, and I immediately crashed and broke an arm on the very first production version, or pre-production version, the prototype. So I gave them feedback, said, hey, you guys got to thicken up the arms, and maybe switch out the ESC, because I thought the ESC was a problem for the flips to death. And they then immediately sent me a new bottom plate here with a thicker arm or wider arm design, and I swapped all the parts over to this frame, but I was still getting flips to death, and I told them that was because of that. Confirmed that it was definitely the ESCs. Okay, so a little history behind the development of the M3. When they first sent me the first prototype of the M3, it was all based on parts from the R90, the 2-inch model. And obviously the motors are different, the frame was different, but they had the same flight stack, the same flight controller, the same 4-in-1 ASC and camera. And I think this is parts from the first prototype, but I swapped it from a different frame. The very first frame they sent me was like this one is a unibody design frame. It's just no separated arms, and these arms were too skinny. So they were 3mm arms, but they were even skinnier than this here. I'm not exactly sure what the thickness or the width of this arm is, but it was much skinnier than this. And because they were using these powerful 1408 motors on, I think this is a 13 amp BSD from the R90, don't remember exactly. I was getting flips to death right away, and I immediately crashed and broke an arm on the very first production version, or pre-production version, the prototype. So I gave them feedback, said, hey, you guys got to thicken up the arms, and maybe switch out the ESC, because I thought the ESC was a problem for the flips to death. And they then immediately sent me a new bottom plate here with a thicker arm or wider arm design, and I swapped all the parts over to this frame, but I was still getting flips to death, and I told them that was because of that. Confirmed that it was definitely the ESCs. Okay, so soon after that feedback was given, they sent me another prototype, and here they went to the individual arm design here. You can see now they have individual arms. This is from one of my suggestions that they should go to replaceable arms, even though it would increase the weight. I think that with this more powerful motor, the speeds that are going to be generated are going to cause the arms to break even at 3mm. So I thought that was a better idea. And then they also increased the ESC size to 20 amps instead of, I think it was 12. And so that actually helped. That eliminated the flips to death. But then I noticed that there was a lot of video noise from either the ESCs or the motors, and at that point they went ahead and changed the design again to the final design, where they changed the motors to reduce the video noise, and that's where the final motors came from. And then the other thing that they changed is the way that the stack was mounted to the frame. This is the old style stack mount that was on the R90 here, and this had problems on the R90 in a crash. A plastic cage would break, and then you would get a lot of vibrations going into the flight controller, because the flight controller would be moving around, and then you'd have to replace this whole cage. So you could get actually replacement cages, but in a hard crash, the plastic was brittle and it would break. And so they changed the design of this plastic mount to something a little bit more flexible, but they ended up going in the actually too it was actually too flexible. It's too soft material, and so the flight controller will end up moving around. And you can't see here because I've actually braced the flight controller here with these foam pads so that they wouldn't move around, so the flight controller can't move around in flight, and so that would cause a lot of problems with tuning. So I suggested that they redesign this whole cage here and change the way that they mounted these components, especially the flight controller, because it's very sensitive to vibration and movement. And so they went from this design where they had the video transmitter on the bottom, then the 4-in-1 ESC, then the flight controller. They actually eliminated this whole cage thing here, and they've gone to a more traditional mounting setup where they're using nylon screws that go up from the bottom, and you have the ESC on the bottom here, and then you have the flight controller, then you have a little plastic piece here that the TBS Unify is now sticky foam mounted to. So there's some sticky foam here that mounts to the bottom of the video transmitter that mounts to this little plastic piece that goes over the flight controller. So this is the final design of the electronics mounting, and that came about because of all the issues that I was having trying to get this tuned because of the way that basically the way the flight controller was mounted. The design is just flawed. Yeah, they could have gone to a different material, I suppose, again, instead of being maybe a little less flexible, but I think they went through several iterations of this and without much success, so they just went back to a more traditional mounting method here, and this is actually working out better. There's actually no issues with tuning on this one now. Now, with regards to the tune, they went with a fairly conservative tune. I didn't actually get a chance to do a final tune on this before they went to production, because they went back and forth with me on this for a couple months, and they did want to get this out to release and get this into people's hands to fly it, because they've been back and forth on the design for a couple months now. If you probably saw the first prototype on my channel, I think it was one of the haul videos where I did the unboxing, but I never actually reviewed it because it just nothing really worked well until they've gone through all these design changes. And so the tune that's on here is a fairly conservative tune. It's a little bit on the loose side, but I think it's better to be safe than sorry. So if they'd gone with a tune that was a little bit more on the edge, then it may be a good tune for certain builds, but not maybe for others. It kind of depends on how the components are mounted and stuff. You can have the exact same PIDs on the exact same build, and one will fly differently than the other because of just little differences in weight distribution and maybe how hard the screws are holding the flight controller down, etc. And those little things will add up to the way the tune behaves on a particular model. So what I did is I went ahead and I did fly a little bit of the original tune, and I just get a feel it flies totally fine, just a little bit on the loose side, and then I upped the gains a little bit, and you can see the final tune in the flight demo, and you can see all the numbers on the OSD screen. So if you want the PIDs that I'm flying with, just look at the flight demo and the numbers that are on the OSD screen. You can just use those. It didn't flash anything or anything like that. I just flew just like it did out of the box, and I think that my numbers work pretty good. The numbers that came stock were pretty good too. I just tweaked it a little bit so that it would fly the way I like it. Anyway, so this model gets a big thumbs up for me. I really like the way it flies. I like the power. I like the looks of this. If you guys are more into the efficiency and battery, time and flight time, that kind of thing, this model is not for you, because this thing is basically an all-out drag racer. If you want all-out speed on 3 inches, this setup is probably the fastest you can probably get out there at this price point. Obviously, you could probably build something custom yourself for more money and get even more speed. Obviously, that's totally possible. But in terms of a almost ready to fly, or in this case a plug and play, this is probably one that I would recommend. So go ahead and I'll show you some flight demo footage. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.